Should Utah adapt Colorado's model of roster building by heavily going all in on the transfer portal moving forward? We're talking about if Kyle Whittingham or Morgan Scalley should be more like Coach Prime moving forward on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen and view of the day. We are available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. If this is your first time tuning into our show, make sure you like and subscribe. Love interacting with everyone in the YouTube comments, as well as on social media. We can follow our show at Locked On Utes on X. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. FanDuel has you covered as we gear up for the NFL playoffs, which are right around the corner. FanDuel is the place to be, the number one sports book in America. And with FanDuel, you can start the season with a big bonus because you get $150 if you get a $5 bet in bonus bets. If you win that first $5 bet, that's $150 in bonus bets. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. My name is GT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. Excited to be joined by the host of Locked On Buffs, and also you Utah fans know him for what he does with Athlon Sports' Utah coverage, Kevin Borba. And Kevin, I do want to lean into a lot of the Buff stuff today because you do a great job covering Colorado, and I think Deion has been such a polarizing figure as well, even before he became the head coach of Colorado, obviously, but especially for the way they have built their roster through the transfer portal. And Deion had a lot of critics, but it worked. Now, there are questions like year one, without, or not year one to year two, but year 2 to 3, you're going to lose Travis, you're going to lose Shedeur. How is that going to work and go? And one thing but it worked this past year. And this is a Colorado team that had invested heavily into the portal over the previous 2 seasons. They finished as one of the best regular season teams in college football, still top 25 program. So I think the question then becomes for Utah, should they make it more like Colorado? And I'm curious for you, how do you think it's worked for Deion? And do you think Utah should do it? Because I do think Utah should lean a little bit more into what the Buffs have done.
I think Utah should use the portal more. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't say they should go all in on the portals like Deion Sanders, because Deion Sanders is bringing in, I don't know how he's going to bring in this year, but the past 2 years he's brought in over 100 players. So we'll just call it 50 players a year, right? We'll just average it out. I don't know if Utah is capable of getting 50 transfers that are worth bringing in. Mm-hmm. And the reason I say this, and this isn't to take a you-know-what on Utah. Utah and Colorado doesn't have a huge NIL fund backing either. But when you get to Colorado and you start popping off, more brands are drawn to you. And I don't know if Utah has that appeal. And also, Deion Sanders just has a different sort of attraction than most programs across the country. And that's no shame against Utah. No programs across the country have it. Even Bill Belichick in North Carolina. I think Michael Vick at Norfolk State, who was just hired before we started the show. Neither of them have the sort of energy and buzz that Deion Sanders does, at least I think, right? And so Deion Sanders has always been in the media. He's always been outspoken, and he's always been a personality. And I don't think you're able to match that, but I do think Utah could probably benefit from adding more experience depth and contributors at positions where they're lacking, right? Like I think obviously quarterback, they went in and got one. Obviously running backs are going to bring in a couple, maybe bring in some pass rushers, some corners. And I think you have to be a little bit more aggressive. Like maybe, I think last year, how many did they bring in? Like 15-ish, right? I would say.
Something like that. Well, I mean, you're talking about being more aggressive. Like I can't remember the last time Utah had an offensive lineman through the portal. Like I don't know why one time you're not just like, hey, here's a guy with some young upside. Like let's bring him in. Especially this last year when the offensive line, especially the interior, struggled late in the year.
Yeah, I think the offensive line would be a good spot to do it. I think they just have to be more picky and choosy. I think the difference between Utah and Colorado, and this is the difference between insert program and Colorado for most programs across the country outside of the Blue Bloods, right, is you're not going to be able to get all of the top guys. Colorado's going to try to get all the top guys, and I think they have a chance for majority of them. Utah needs to find guys who, and it's all about scouting and development, right? You need guys who are maybe looking for an opportunity to prove themselves a bit more. Like Dorian Singer is a prime example, right? Dorian Singer was an all Pac-12 guy, transfers to USC, doesn't do much of anything, but we knew what he could be. And I think Utah has to find those guys, and that's easier said than done.
It is easier said than done, but you are absolutely right. You cannot become like Colorado because Utah isn't Colorado. Coach Prime and the appeal that he has and the job he's done too, recruiting players of that level, it's just not as Utah's not going to be able to get in the door with the same guys as, hey, Kyle Whittingham, respected coach, but it's not Deion Sanders. You're not going to be able to get into the same room as guys, or Morgan Scalley, or whoever. And this time next year could very well likely be Morgan Scalley when Utah would look to change their approach. But yeah, we agree that Utah has to use the portal more moving forward. I mentioned offensive line, but there's other positions in years past where I feel like they've neglected them a little bit, and they could have benefited from more additions in the portal and embracing it even more. And it feels like this year they have embraced it more. Obviously, there's been a lot of guys that they've added.
And also use the players from the portal, right? I think Damen Alford will be like my biggest. Gosh. That would be the biggest like portal disappointment I've seen in a while. And I don't know like what the backstory was. I think I remember him throwing the ball more than I do him running around. Same with Carson Ryan. I know he was injured, but I would have liked to see him more. Mm-hmm. I know Keenan Johnson got hurt. Would have liked to see what the defense looked like with him healthy. Like there's just so many guys in the portal that they brought. Like Caleb Lohner, I feel like the basketball dude from Baylor. He was a basketball dude. He was massive, right? They used him as a basketball dude, so I would have seen him used more, right? Don't just use him when you're in the red zone, and don't just use him on field goal to jump as high as he can to try to block field goals. Like use him a little bit, right? I feel like they didn't maximize their portal guys as well as they could have.
I agree. With Lohner, I think they used him on a couple of field goal blocks. I will say that, but I don't know if they did that all season long. Right. With Lohner, Kevin, I want you to guess his stat line on the season. How many catches do you think he had? How many yards and touchdowns? I'm just curious what you think it is, because I looked at this recently.
Yards, I would guess no more than like 80.
Okay.
And it might even be 50 yards. It wouldn't shock me. Maybe less, because I feel like I don't remember him ever catching the ball not in the red zone.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go 4 catches, 3 touchdowns for 55 yards.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Do you promise you're not looking at it?
I'm not.
Okay, because you were really actually like crazy close. He had 4 catches. All 4 of them were in the end zone for touchdowns.
Okay.
And he had around and it was right around like 54 yards, something like
that. Okay.
So
hey, not bad.
Hey, as you go. Hey, if anyone was wondering, like, hey, does the Locked On Buffs guy actually do the run his site at Athlon Sports? I think that was pretty dang good evidence right there. That was one of the best guesses we've ever had on this show. But yeah, Damen Alford is a great one that you bring up. I mean, just a catastrophe, for literally lack of a better word. Like he had 600 yards at Syracuse. He averaged 19 yards per catch, and he throws the ball more than he catches it. They can't. And the year before, you have Emory Simons, who was the wide receiver from North Carolina and Indiana. I think he'd gone a little bit of both. You bring him in, you're all excited. He's going to be a new addition to this program. What's he going to do? Nothing. Micah Pittman was another one, too. So you really do have to maximize your players. And I mean, we've seen that in the portal this year for Utah, right? They haven't always been able to land some of the top guys they'd probably like to get in the room for. Dampier was a big get, but there's been several other players we would have loved if Utah could have landed too. So yeah, Utah's definitely missed out in the transfer portal on several times, and you do need to adapt more to the portal, but you also need to maximize the guys you have when they come in so that you can reap the benefit that not just that season, but in the portal the following year, going like, hey, this guy transferred to Utah and then he went off. And Jason Beck will hopefully help that on the offensive side of the ball, because that is where most of the transfers that Utah's brought in have been squandered. There have been very few defensive transfers that haven't made an impact at Utah. So it's going to be interesting to see how this portal continues to play out. One thing that was fascinating this year was just to watch the new Big 12 as Buffaloes as well as Utah, both first-year members in the Big 12. The question is, what do we think of the new Big 12? Is it a success? Was it something that we should continue, that all sides should continue with moving forward? That's something I want to discuss in one moment. But first, today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our great friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. FanDuel has you covered, and as I was talking about earlier, we are right around the corner for the start of the NFL playoffs, and FanDuel has got you ready for the biggest games all season long, because they are America's #1 sportsbook. And because right now you can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And speaking of the NFL, who's going to take the top wildcard spots? Are we going to see the Denver Broncos be able to get in and complete an insane season with Bo Nix and Sean Payton doing a heck of a job? Can the NFC North really get 3 teams in? It seems like that's going to happen too. But however you guys think it's going to play out, which teams you think are going to get the top seeds, it's all available on FanDuel, NBA, NHL, and whatever it may be. College football still going on too, and college basketball. FanDuel is the place to be. Once again, you get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet at FanDuel Sportsbook today. All right, Kevin, keeping this one rolling. Simple question. Does the new look Big 12 work? I want to hear your opinion first.
I think it does. I think the new look Big 12 reminds me a little bit of the Pac-12 in the sense of it's not going to get the same respect that the SEC and the Big 10 do. But I think at the end of the day, it's a very competitive conference, and I liked what we saw this year. To be honest, I thought it was competitive. It was, for lack of a better term or lack of a better comparison, it was like the Pac-12 to me. Everybody could win every single week, which in the end, as you know, as a former Pac-12er, can hurt the conference and how it looks, right? BYU 2, Colorado, Iowa State. Like, there was 4 teams that were tied for first place in the final week of the season. And there was talks from the powers that be, if you will, that the Big 12 may not make the college football playoff. The Big 12 may not get the at-large bid, or not, excuse me, the at-large bid, the first round bye. And I think that's just going to have to be something that the Big 12 has to deal with, because I don't foresee, unless, and this goes back to like the Florida State Clemson drama of like last year, where it's like, I don't foresee there being a brand big enough to sort of get this whole conference respect that it should deserve, or it does deserve.
I totally agree. And I want to go back to my original question first. Just, does the new Big 12 work? Absolutely agree with you. I love the new Big 12. I think it's fantastic. The Pac-12 fell apart. That's in the past. Moving forward with the Big 12, I thought this year was great for college football. Was it great for Utah? Of course not. They had a brutal season for what was expected. But you know what's awesome for college football? Unlikely stories. Arizona State picked to finish dead last, finding a way to win. We love a competitive conference. That's what the SEC bills itself as, right? This crazy competitive, top-notch conference and all the rest of the yada yada we hear all the time too. Big 12 generally was that. Anyone could beat anyone. Even Oklahoma State, who was not good, they nearly beat BYU. Utah, who was not very good, nearly beat BYU as well. Like, this is what makes college football great. These unpredictable outcomes, these unpredictable results. Kevin, I'll ask you this. Going into next season, just spitballing, how many teams could win the Big 12, like right now when we sit recording this?
Oh gosh, you're probably at 6 or 7, I think, on any given year, right? I think to name them, we'll just assume that Utah bounces back. So Utah, Colorado, Arizona State's going to build off of what they had. Iowa State got Rocco Becht back. BYU is probably going to be pretty good. So that's 5 right there. I feel like I'm probably even missing someone.
Maybe
Baylor's a good one. Yeah, Baylor's 6.
I'm not believe at UCF. I think it takes a little bit more time. Cincinnati takes more time. West Virginia, first-year head coach for Rich Rodriguez. I don't see that.
That was 6 off the dome though, so I feel like that's
exactly
6 out of 10 is pretty good, or 6 out of 10. 6 out of 16 is pretty good. That used to be the Big 12, 10 teams. But I think it'd be hard to go to other conferences, and like the Big 10. Name me 6 teams that'll win it next year. I'll tell you Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, and then I'll probably say Michigan maybe. And that's it, right? That's it for me. And the SEC maybe a little bit different. Texas, Georgia, Bama, Ole Miss, if we know who their quarterback is. So I think the Big 12 is in a good spot, right? I think as a conference, it's at a good spot competitively. I think there's a lot of teams that could contend for it. But at the end of the day, I think what would help the Big 12, and I think you've heard this before, just not for the Big 12, for the Pac-12 maybe, is they need someone to set themselves apart and sort of be like that. The dominant team, and whether it's Colorado or not, maybe that helps. Whether it's Utah or not, maybe that helps. But I think the problem is other people look around the college football scenery and they're like, Oregon went 13-0. Obviously, the Big Ten's like, obviously they're great. And then they look at the Big 12 and they're like, it's 4 teams tied for first place. Nobody in that conference is good.
Do they do that? But isn't it also brands? Isn't that like just the Oregon brand? Like, how does the Big 12 overcome that, Kevin?
Yeah, the team's got to grow their brands, and there's not really an easy way to do that. Like Colorado's brand is because of Deion Sanders. I think it'd be disingenuous to say anything else. Like Colorado has always been a respected program. Yeah, maybe. I didn't think of them as a top 25 program though, year in and year out, and you have to think of them as that now. Yeah, growing up, I would say Colorado was kind of an afterthought for me as a West Coast kid, and like now they are at the forefront of college football. And so I think it's all about brand growth, and I think it's about sustained success. Because obviously, Clemson was not Clemson before, like it was like Taj Boyd was good, and then it was like there was a phrase. Now if people remember this, it was called Clemsoning, and it was like, could Clemson get over the hump because they would always fall apart? It was called Clemsoning, and then Deshaun Watson, and my timeline could be a little hit or miss, but I know it was Taj Boyd to whomever, and then Deshaun Watson comes, right? Clemson wasn't always a blue blood powerhouse. They weren't. Texas, for instance, for the past decade and a half has been absolutely terrible, but you build the brand up. Obviously, Texas has always been a big brand, but you win games and everyone's like, Texas is back. We're cool with Texas again. And so it's just a matter of winning games and sustaining success. And I think, like, if Arizona State starts to string together a few 10-plus win seasons, maybe they're going to be the face of the conference, right? It just depends on who wins and who does it the most consistently.
Yep, it's absolutely the case. And for this new look Big 12, I asked you to list those contenders too. What's crazy is, could you imagine last year we would have never said Arizona State, and they were the ones who came out of nowhere to end up winning it all too. And even like for the contenders we were talking about, I think we might have forgotten Kansas State. Oklahoma State is a bounce back potential. I don't know. They're kind of a crazy situation. Kansas is another one. Maybe they do have Daniels coming back. Do we get end of the season Kansas, or do we get like regular season Kansas? So the fact that that's half the conference. It is. So that's incredible. And I think that's cool. And like you said too, some people could take that as, well, that's because there's not a dominant brand. And yeah, I guess that's fair. But also here's the thing. Brands don't always carry over year to year. Like, there's a reason that Utah was winning Pac-12 championships over Oregon and USC. They were just better teams. So I hope that the Big 12 continues to get some respect. I do think there's going to be years like the ACC just had. Like, why can't the Big 12 have several of the teams we just named be next year's SMU? Like, I see no reason why they couldn't. So if you could get multiple teams in, and BYU beat SMU early in the regular season, that would be another big thing for building that respect and brand for the Big 12. And I think there is a world where this team could get 2 teams in. They need the SEC to continue to beat itself up too. And we know the narratives that are always going to run with the SEC, Kevin. But if you get 2 teams in the playoff, I think that would also help give this conference even more respect. Because, I mean, do you think the ACC is viewed as better than the Big 12 right now?
Probably, but not by much. I think.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think SMU making it, Clemson making it, Miami was on the outside looking in. So I think they kind of get the edge. I think realistically what the Big 12 needs is a conference, and there's not really a way to control this because then you start playing with schedules weird. You need 2 or 3 teams to have 2 or less losses. And those losses come from early season. Like, I don't know if the Big 12.
Good teams.
Right. So it's tough, right? You can't hit that 3-loss threshold. And unfortunately for the Big 12, I think it was all 4 of the top teams had 3 losses, if I'm not mistaken, right? Or was it just
for the preseason poll?
No. The top 4 teams at the end of the season there before the Big 12.
I think BYU did.
Okay.
They didn't have 3 losses. Colorado did. To your point, Iowa State, I think they were just 10-2 until they lost. Obviously, Arizona State 2 losses. So 2 of 4.
They got to be better than that. And like it's hard because like I remember talking about Colorado's path to the playoff, and like I would look at the other schedules of the other teams, and it was like, okay, BYU plays this team. Okay, Iowa State plays this team, and it's like they're going at it. And that's always been the problem with the Big 12 is the best are always going to play the best, which is good for product, but bad for the conference's chances of making playoff.
Does the Big 12 need to schedule a week 11 game against Mercer? Is that what we're saying too?
I mean, take away a conference game, maybe. I mean, it wouldn't hurt, right?
I hate it, but it might actually be what they have to do in order to just get more teams in the playoffs. So that's something.
Win on the year. Extra win on the year. It's an extra win, and it takes away a possible loss from a conference member.
This is where I wish we had a college football commissioner that would be like, you're going to play one FCS team, you're going to play one group of 5 team, and then you were going to play one other Power 4 team that you can schedule. Or even like, what if we grouped together like the Big 10 and the SEC and then the ACC and the Big 12 and had like whatever team finished each spot in the standings like last year, you just play them across like that, which is what the NFL does from year to year. I would love something like that.
I like that idea. I haven't heard that before. I like that.
Thank you. Yeah. Hey, maybe I can be college football commissioner.
Here he is.
Me or Josh, isn't Josh Pate the other one who always campaigns for it?
You and Josh Pate, you guys can go at it.
He's like the one person in college football media I got more hair than. So at least I got that on.
Nice.
But yeah, hopefully we see some type of format such as that in the future. One thing we're definitely going to see more of in the future is the Rumble of the Rockies. And that is what, for those of you who don't know, I will be honest, I forgot the name of it before we started recording. Utah versus Colorado is called. So I want to talk about the state of this rivalry from the Pac-12 now to the Big 12. To round out today's show, we're going to be discussing said rivalry in one moment. But first, today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our friends at Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps you lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of 500 million in canceled subscriptions. That's right. They've helped people save over 500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. For me, one of the best features is that subscription tracker. I mean, how many times do we forget we're paying for a service? That's where it comes in, because it can cancel services that you're not using anymore. I've already saved a ton. Plus, with their goals feature, I've been able to automatically set aside money for my future goals with no more stressing about budgeting every month. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. All right, Kevin, talking about the Rumble of the Rockies. It's an interesting rivalry, to say the least, because it wasn't great in the Pac-12. There weren't a ton of memorable matchups. What's funny is the last two have been like weirdly close at times. Like, yes, obviously Colorado ended up blowing out Utah, but that game was a game in the fourth quarter until Isaac Wilson threw that interception down the sideline, because that was going to make it I think like a 3 or 4 point game, some much thinner margin than it was. Year before that, we had the crazy. So it was Luke Pittard for Utah. Do you remember the name of the Buffs QB in that game, the one 2 years ago at Rice Eccles?
Right. Oh, 2 years ago?
Or the one just – not 2 years ago.
Last year. Sorry. Ryan Staub. Yeah.
Ryan Staub. Where did he end up at?
He's still in the quarterback room. Backing up Shador. Yeah.
Is he is the backup?
He is the backup. Yeah, he's the number 2 guy still. Probably going to change now because they're after Caden Salter, and they also have Julian Lewis. So I don't know what his plans are, but he stayed around. I like that for him.
Hey, shout out him. You don't always see that in this today's college football world. But talk about, is this rivalry in a good place? I still don't feel like it is. I don't know. It just doesn't feel like there's a lot of excitement around it. I will say, I really wish you guys end up playing Oklahoma State, the Big 12 final weekend. If as a Utah fan, if I can't have Utah versus BYU, I would at least rather have Utah versus Colorado. No, it wasn't a great rivalry, but especially if you're going to try to build this into something, on paper, this was the year to put it in the final week of the season, because we expected Utah to be really good. And even though Colorado surpassed our expectations, we knew they'd be entertaining. And that matchup there with what Shador could do, I always thought it could present a challenge. So I feel like the Big 12 has missed the mark there, and kind of just, I don't know how well they try to market this rivalry. Once again, if it's not Utah BYU in late November next year, I want it to be the Rumble at the Rockies, because with the potential that Coach Prime and the Buffs continue to, just the heights they continue to reach, Utah is a team that's been at a good height. They're stumbled a little bit, but I think they can bounce back. These are two of the best programs in the Big 12 moving forward. We should be able to invest more in them in terms of scheduling and try and build this up, even though it's Utah's fault last year that it didn't live up to more of a marketing and marquee build. I say that, and then it ended up on big news. That's the other thing.
I think for the rivalry to really gain traction, this goes for any rivalry in college football that's not the Red River rivalry, the Iron Bowl, Army versus Navy. I think that's it. Am I missing one?
Say that again.
You got the Iron Bowl, Red River rivalry, which is Texas, Oklahoma, Army, Navy.
The game, maybe Ohio State, Michigan.
Yes, the game is a good one. The outdoor cocktail party, maybe, which is Florida, Georgia. I don't remember what it's actually called, but I know that's what they call it.
A great Florida rivalry game name. So
yeah, I like that. So I think those are the 5 games that no matter how bad one of the teams are, say this year Oklahoma is terrible, and people still watch that because it's Texas, Oklahoma, and the game's always chaotic. Colorado and Utah don't have the benefit of the doubt. They're not those brands. And so what really needs to happen to revitalize this game is they both need to be good at the same time. Colorado was not good for the past decade, probably almost a decade. 2016 was not a decade, I guess. And Utah was good for the past decade. And they just they need to be on the same path at the same time. So if they turn it around, like say that last game of the week, instead of it just being Colorado needs to win this game just to get to 9 wins and Utah wants to win this game just for S&Gs, say it was whoever wins goes to the Big 12 title game, or whoever wins gets home field at the Big 12 title game. Like that's where I think it would build it up, right? Because I think the Big 12 has a scenario right now where, with the conference being so new, with so many new programs, there's obviously traditional rivalries like Arizona State, Arizona, Utah, BYU is another one, but they have a chance to build rivalries up. And you kind of have to pick these rivalries, make sure they play every year, and then hope that the teams are good at the same time.
You said something that really excited me, and I think it's something that the Big 12 should absolutely adapt. And I know there's a lot of money in these neutral site conference championship game spots. The best team in the conference, whatever metric you determine it, should get to host a conference championship game. I think that would absolutely make conference championship games more excited. I can't get the image out of my head of Boise State, Ashton Genty. They win it on that Friday night, storm the field, everyone there. An amazing scene to see that all happen. I would love to see that. I mean, how would you feel about that?
You know what image I can't get out of my head?
What one?
The image of the Big 12 championship this year, the crowd. It looked like it was a high school football game in terms of attendance, right? I think that's the Big 12's problem, is that right there. None of these brands are big enough. Like I think Colorado, if they would have made it, or BYU, they would have made it. Probably Utah as well. Those 3 teams, I think they would
have Tech and Baylor in proximity.
Yeah, I think those teams, if they made it, they would have traveled well. But with the conference being so widespread, right? Like say UCF made it. You think a lot of people are going to make the trip from Orlando to Texas for a weekend? Like that's not a weekend trip, right? Yeah. That's not like hey, I'm going to take Friday off. We're going to fly in. Saturday we'll come. Like that's just not, doesn't make sense. And so I think the home games for Big 12 conferences would make sense. I also think it would probably strengthen the Big 12 a little bit, because say Colorado's playing at Utah. Say Utah's the 1 seed, Colorado's 2 seed. Colorado goes to Utah, and in this perfect world, they both have 1 loss. Yeah. And Colorado wins, or Colorado loses or whatever, but it's a close game. Well, it's like Colorado just lost a close game to a top 25 team on the road. So I think it adds a little bit more respect as well. So
Clemson and SMU both would get into me unless the SEC went crazy, but more than likely one of them will just lose to Oklahoma again.
Right. So it's just one of those things where I think it could make it more entertaining, and I think you'll get a better turnout. And I think that's the hard part with these conference championships, especially if you're not the SEC or the Big Ten, is because the SEC and the Big Ten, in a way, like obviously this is going to sound weird, the Big Ten, not really the Big Ten as much, but the SEC is still regional. Like Atlanta is not that far from anyone in the SEC. The Big Ten, the schools that made it outside of UCLA, or excuse me, the schools that they added outside of UCLA are known for traveling well, are known for being supportive. So they're always going to have crowds. The Big 12 is known for home field advantage, right? Iowa State, the Oklahoma State, I forget. Utah. You go to these places and they're not the biggest stadiums, but they get rowdy, they fill up. And I think the Big 12 is hurting itself by not exploring that.
I agree. And hopefully it's something they'll do moving forward to try and revitalize that conference championship game atmosphere. Kevin, your presence always revitalizes this podcast. So thank you so much, my friend, for stopping by. If people want to check out more of what you got going on, not just with Locked On Bucks, but of course, Athlon, where can they head over to?
Yeah, you can follow me at Kevin_Borba, and you can also follow me at Athlon Sports, talking about all things college football. If you like college football, I probably am covering your team in one way or another. So come check me out.
Thanks again, Kevin. You're the man.
Yep. Have a good one.
That's going to do it for today's Locked On Utes. We'll be back with you soon talking about the latest in Utah football and Utah athletics. We hope you'll join us then.